In this video, I'm going to make some chokecherry jam out of the chokecherries that grow on my front property. And at the same time, I'm going to consider my relationship with the ecosystem in which those chokecherries grow. Now, I was raised with this principle or axiom that we should all, as human beings, minimize our ecological footprint. Uh, Now I understand that axiom is based on the notion that human beings are necessarily destructive, with which I disagree, but that we are necessarily destructive, and anything we do uh, is, is is destructive, and therefore we should try to do as little as possible. However, if we act intelligently and ethically, we should maximize our footprint because we're going to have an influence one way or the other. Why not have a good influence? So there's my maple tree. It's over 100 years old. It's over 100 feet tall. The roots go deep into the ground. They pull up nutrients and minerals deep in the ground, and they make them available through the leaves that fall in the autumn to the plants on the surface. So to make sure that now, one thing I could do, like many do, and I have done in the past, is collect the leaves, put them in plastic bags or something, and then leave them for the city to put in dumps. On the other hand, now I collect them and I make sure that they are uh, held in place by this periwinkle that grows. The little in the fall, those little twigs hold the leaves in place. The leaves decompose. It could take up to a year for the leaves to decompose, but that doesn't matter because once the system is in place, once the decomposition is in place, it just perpetuates. Now, at that point, the those minerals that come from the ground complete a cycle in which my chokecherries, and there you see the blossoms in early spring, have have the nutrients they need to make nutritious chokecherries. Chokecherries were a staple element of native North American diets, along with service berries. Those are the berries there in June when they turn red. My variety turn a deep purple black, and then they're ripe to be picked. Native North Americans use them for mix them with dried meat, and that was pemmican that was a staple of their diet. So now what I want to do is, again, how does this human element, me that is, uh, make sure that the system reproduces that the cycle reproduces as effectively as possible. One way I was able to do that, because my property is on a slight slope, so every time it rains, the top layer of soil, along with the rainfall, ran off. So last November, I built a small dry stone wall. Dry stone wall is an ancient process. It's brilliant. It uses simply the principles. It uses friction and gravity to hold in place the rocks. That wall there is very, very solid. And now you see the plants also start to grow into it and hold it in place. Here are some in the front, some hens and chicken plants that actually grab onto the rocks and hold them in place. But what this does is it stops everything behind it, the soil and the water, from flowing off too quickly. That means that the rainfall is able to stay there and enrich the soil, help to decompose the leaves that it has that have fallen, and that I encourage to remain there on the property. Now here are the chokecherry trees. Well, I've already really harvested them, but just to show, I leave many of them for the birds. Um, there were so many. Well, we'll see eventually how many I had, but I have over more than the bucket that you'll see down below. You'll full. Here the branches are really pliable. You can just pull them down and harvest the berries. In fact, in the wild, bears do that. They just rip the branches right off and eat them. So this human element can just pull off the berries by cupping my fingers around the the bunches of berries and just squeezing. So that pulls them off. Here we'll see it again. You just pull and you'll see these dark red berries. Now, those dark red berries, after they've been boiled and then let simmer and then come back to room temperature, all of that beautiful purple juice comes out of them. And now my job, my challenge is to extract this the pulp and the juice from the berry. So that's what I'm doing here in on my back balcony. And the best tool to do that I have found is just my hands. So that is, you can really feel them, you squish them. It's a cherry and it has a great, a pretty big pit. So, but I want to get the maximum amount of pulp and juice out of the cherry that I can. So just squeeze, and uh, let the juice fall into that big metal pot that I have. In the other container next to it, the plastic bowl next to it, I throw the pits and the skins. They'll just go into my compost heap. Some pits will fall into the juice and the pulp, but it doesn't matter because when I cook them for my jam, it will they float on top, so I can really quite easily skim off all of the extra pits that I wasn't able to keep out of the pulp and juice. So that's a bit of a process there. And as you'll see here, that's about a third of what I got, the pulp and the juice. Now I'm going to make the jam. Now this is jam. This part in this part, I'm using refined sugar. So I have no illusions about that. That's not the best, but for the moment, it's the way I'm going to make my jam, along with a quarter of a cup of um, lemon juice, and then 4 cups of this uh, pulp juice mixture that I've squeezed out of the berries. Though that sugar, 4.5 cups of sugar, I put aside. So that I'll add later. Into this into this uh, pot in the foreground, I'm adding now the a package of cerdopectin um, into the lemon juice and the uh, the cherry juice. Okay, so there you put in the oven. You can put it. That's one way of sterilizing the jars. Putting them in the oven at 400 and what no what was it 225 degrees Fahrenheit uh, for at least 10 minutes. Leave them in. Let them stay in there so that they're warm or hot when you fill them. The lids I just boil in water. Now I'm adding. Once you've brought the lemon juice, and pectin to a boil, then you can add the sugar, which I've just done. You add the sugar and you bring it back to a boil. It'll be ready. This is a trick that my grandmother taught me. My grandmother was born in Ontario, and an Ontario farm back in 1901. And when I was a little boy, she showed me that when you stir the jam, and when you see you lift the your wooden ladle up, and when you have one drop, two drop, three drop, and when the fourth drop doesn't want to come off, it just sort of takes a while forming, and it finally drops. That's when you've got a proper a consistency for your jam. In other words, it's going to be a proper jelly. So you keep stirring all the time. Absolutely, don't think you can walk away from it. You stir it. It's not that long, but you must stay there and stir it because you definitely don't want it to burn. It'll ruin everything. Take the jars out of the oven. Um, as long as you don't touch the lids or the insides of the jars, everything stays sterilized. I just pour it right in from the center of the into the center of the jars, and that seems to work. Just the jars are hot, but I only put a third in at a time because this is pretty hot stuff, hot um, jam. So I'll fill up the jars. Finally, I had 15 of these jars, just from those few trees out in the front yard. Then I put the rest. I decided I'd just freeze the rest, and maybe I'll explore with some other recipe or something. Maybe try to do something without refined sugar. But meanwhile, maybe I'll do this in January. Rather than make all 21 jars right now, I'll just leave this aside and think about what to do with it in the wintertime. So here they are, and there it is. Bon appetit.